These days, listening to music is pretty simple. But it wasn't always this way. To see how we got here, we'll have to go back to the start. Before this, and even this. In 1888, Thomas Edison released the first commercially available recording device, the phonographic cylinder. Recordings were engraved onto the outside of wax cylinders and could hold about 2 minutes of audio. But they were quickly overtaken by the gramophone. These used a very similar mechanism, but were pressed onto flat discs instead. While quality was about the same, these could be mass-produced much more efficiently, so they quickly came to dominate the market. In the middle of the 20th century, transistor radios changed the way people listen to music. Radio wasn't a new invention, but their size and price typically meant they were limited to one per household. But new technology meant radios were now much smaller and cheaper, so families no longer had to share. This also meant that young people could develop their own music taste, completely separate from what their parents were listening to. Around the same time, the long-playing record, or LP, was introduced. Although they look pretty similar to previous formats, they present quite a few upgrades. For one, the discs were now made of vinyl instead of shellac plastic. This new material produced a lot less background noise than the previous one, so overall audio quality was a lot higher. They could also hold over 20 minutes of audio per side, which gave birth to the album format as we know it today. This revolutionized the way music was released. Now, artists would write and record until they had enough songs to fill an album, eventually seeing these albums as their own cohesive package. Record companies would then choose the songs that had the most commercial and radio appeal and release them as singles, smaller discs which could hold one song on each side. LPs and singles maintained their dominance for decades, until the 1980s when they were overtaken by the cassette. These consisted of a small magnetic tape which was protected by a plastic case. This casing meant they were a bit more durable than vinyl records, and their small size also meant they were a lot more portable. Eventually, devices like the Walkman meant listeners could take their music with them wherever they went. They were also much easier to record, so people could tape live performances, radio broadcasts, or even make copies of other tapes. This meant that people could make their own mixtapes, a personal collection of their favourite songs. But they weren't without their drawbacks. Audio quality was a step down from vinyl records, and record labels eventually fought back against home recording devices over piracy fears. But soon after, CDs came in to offer the best of both worlds. Audio quality was much higher than cassette tapes, but they still offered a similar, portable form factor. They also marked the transition to digital, which meant durability wasn't nearly as big of a concern as it was with previous formats. Tech-savvy users could also use their computers to extract files from their CDs. Soon, companies began selling MP3 players, devices dedicated to playing these files. These let people take their entire music library with them wherever they went. The internet also made it possible for users to spread these files worldwide. In 2000, a program called Napster drew the ire of the recording industry. The program made it easier than ever for people to download music for free. The lawsuits quickly became too much for the company to handle, and it went bankrupt. But by this point, the genie was out of the bottle. In 2003, Apple introduced the iTunes Store. This gave users an experience similar to Napster, but with one key difference. It was legal. Not only was it entirely online, but for the first time people could buy specific songs instead of entire albums, even if the song wasn't released as a single. But it was still a far cry from Napster. Once people had tasted free music, it was hard to go back. Luckily, they wouldn't have to. In 2008, Spotify launched in Sweden. They set themselves apart by giving users access to a huge library of music for free, keeping labels happy by paying them a portion of their ad revenue. This model exploded in popularity, eventually expanding to an a la carte subscription model. Several companies jumped on the bandwagon, but Spotify is the market leader to this day. The current model is still far from perfect. Artists have been complaining for years that the revenue split is incredibly slim. It's not perfect for users either. Because they don't actually own the music, their favourite songs can be changed or even removed completely at the drop of a hat. So what now? In recent years, we've actually seen a resurgence in physical media. Buying music means fans can directly support their favourite artists, and owning it makes it much harder for it to be taken away. Social media has also made it easier for artists to connect directly with fans, as they no longer need to deal with gatekeepers like record labels and radio DJs to get their music heard.